What's good, guys? Welcome back to the first take. Now, I haven't uploaded in a couple of days. Been at the dentist, getting teeth pulled, and they fucked up. Still, even got my little medical bracelet on. They fucked up and sliced the inside of my cheek, so I've been a little laid up for a minute. But let's get back, man. Bare requests. Thankfully, though, I'm happy you guys told me about this. That the new Game of Thrones History and Lore has dropped. I don't even know which one is this one? This one's season 6. So yeah, like before, I'll probably chop these up into like 3 parts, 20 minutes each. So let's jump in, man. I'm curious, man, because the last lot were amazing. Like, so good. And it's made me even more adamant that they need to do this prequel, which they're developing, but we don't know what area and what time they're going to... Let's just watch this shit and get into it. Part 1. Let's do this.
Years ago, in the height of summer, my father told my brother and me a story. He only told it once, and he refused to speak of it ever again. When he was a young man, in the year of the false spring, a great southern lord held the largest tourney Westeros had ever seen, in the largest castle Westeros had ever seen. Knights and lords from across the 7 kingdoms made their way, drawn by the spectacle and the size of the champion's purse. Even the king was rumoured to be attending, though none had seen him in years. Ours is a small house, and my father had come only to be part of the magnificence, whose like he'd never see again. One afternoon, he was walking across the field, enjoying the warm spring day, when he was set upon by 3 squires. None were older than 15, yet all were bigger than him. This was their world, as they saw it, and he had no right to be there. They snatched away his spear and knocked him to the ground, cursing him for a frog-eater. Every time he tried to rise, they shoved him down and kicked him when he curled up on the ground. But then they heard a shout.
"That's my father's man you're kicking!"
howled the she-wolf. Lyanna Stark, the young daughter of Lord Rickard Stark, Warden of the North and my father's liege lord. Lyanna laid into the squires with a tourney sword, scattering them all. My father was bruised and bloodied, so she took him back to her tent to clean his cuts and bind them up with linen. There he met her brothers, Wild Brandon, who led them, the quiet Eddard, and Benjen, who was the youngest of the 4. That evening, there was to be a feast in Harrenhal to mark the opening of the tourney, and Lyanna insisted that my father attend, as he was of high birth with as much a right to a place on the bench as any other man. She was not easy to refuse, this wolf maid, so my father borrowed suitable clothes from Benjen and went up to the great castle. Under Harren's great roof, my father ate and drank with his fellow Northmen. A black brother beseeched the knights to join the Night's Watch, to snickers and smiles. Prince Rhaegar sang a song so sad that it brought tears to Lyanna's eyes. But when Benjen teased her for it, she poured wine over his head. Lord Baratheon drank down a night of skulls and kisses in a wine cup war. My father remembered a beautiful woman with purple eyes, who danced with Sir Barristan Selmy and several others.
Ooh.
As the end of the evening approached, Brandon Stark asked her for one more dance on his shy brother's behalf, and so Eddard Stark shared the last dance of the celebration with Lady Ashara Dane. Abruptly, the hall went quiet. The Mad King had come after all, and was now entering the hall with his Kingsguard. He hadn't left the Red Keep in years, and none could believe the state of him. His long yellow fingernails, tangled beard, and ropes of unwashed, matted hair made his madness plain to all. Nor was his behaviour that of a sane man, for in the blink of an eye he could go from hysterical laughter to weeping to rage. But when he commanded Sir Jaime Lannister to kneel before him and swear the oath of the Kingsguard before half the lords of the realm, a cheer burst from the crowd, for Sir Jaime was much admired for his courage, gallantry, and skill with a sword. Amidst all this merriment, my father spied the 3 squires who'd attacked him, attending their knights. Lyanna saw them too, and pointed them out to her brothers. "I could find you a horse and some armour that might fit," Benjen offered. My father thanked him, but gave no answer. Our people sit a boat more often than a horse, and our hands are made for oars, not lances. Much as he wished to have his vengeance, he feared he would only make a fool of himself and shame his people. Eddard had offered my father a place in his tent that night,
Man.
but before my father slept, he knelt on the lake shore, looking across the water to the Isle of Faces, and said a prayer to the old gods. The next day in the tourney, the 3 knights whose squires had beaten my father unseated their opponents and earned a place among the champions. But late in the afternoon, as the shadows grew long, a mystery knight appeared in the lists. He was short, and clad in ill-fitting armour cobbled together from different suits. On his shield was painted a heart tree of the old gods,
You know
a
what that
white
is.
weirwood with a laughing red face. The Mystery Knight dipped his lance before the king and rode to the end of the lists, where the 5 champions had their pavilions. You can guess the 3 he challenged. Whoever the Mystery Knight was, the old gods gave strength to his arm.
Who could it be?
All 3 knights fell before him. None were well loved, so the common folk cheered the Knight of the Laughing Tree, as the new champion was soon called. When his fallen foes sought to ransom their horses and armour, the Knight of the Laughing Tree's voice boomed through his helm and told them, "Teach your squires honour. That shall be ransom enough." Once the defeated knights chastised their squires sharply, their horses and armour were returned, and so my father's prayer was answered. The king was furious. In his madness, he suspected a traitor in his midst, perhaps even the newly made Sir Jaime Lannister, whom he had already sent back to the Red Keep. That night, the king asked Lord Robert Baratheon to take to the lists and unmask the Mystery Knight, declaring him no friend of his. But the next morning, when the heralds blew their trumpets and the king took his seat, the Knight of the Laughing Tree had vanished. All they ever found was his painted shield, hanging abandoned in a tree. My father's tale ended here. He never spoke more of Harrenhal, though he must have seen Prince Rhaegar's victory. Some whispered that Prince Rhaegar himself had arranged the entire tourney in secret, as a way to gather the great lords and address his father's apparent madness, perhaps even remove him from the Iron Throne. But when I asked my father about this, he only shrugged sadly. What Rhaegar intended, none can say. But all know what he did.
Northern allegiances to House Stark.
The North is the oldest and largest of the 7 kingdoms, but House Stark has not always held it. When Bran the Builder raised Winterfell and founded our line, we were vassals to the Barrow Kings, who claimed descent from the first king and thus dominion over all the first men. But after the long night, it was our house who built the wall and set the Night's Watch to guard the realms of men, whilst our king sat in his barrow. My ancestors eventually revolted, waging what singers call the 1,000 Years' War, to free our lands. Other families joined us, recognizing that the North is a cold and hard land and needed a king who served its people before himself. Finally, the last Barrow King bent the knee, and House Stark became the kings of winter. Yet we were kings in name only, for by then the North had fractured into petty kingdoms, and my ancestors would struggle to unite it again for thousands of years. Roderick Stark wrestled an Ironborn lord for Bear Island and granted it to House Mormont when he won. A younger son of our family, Carlon Stark, won his own keep after he put down a rebellion and founded House Karstark, one of the most powerful in the North. When the Mandaleys were exiled from the Reach, my ancestors shielded them and gave them a home at the mouth of the White Knife, in return for holding the river against pirates and invaders. Now they're one of the wealthiest houses in the North. I'm not so naive to pretend that the entire North welcomed Stark rule. The last Wall King was slain at Sea Dragon Point along with all his sons and beasts. The last Marsh King died at the hands of King Rickard Stark, and House Reed has held the swamps of the Neck ever since. Houses Greenwood, Towers, Amber, Frost. None survive today as more than names in dusty old books. But my ancestors never wanted to destroy their foes' root and stem. The Umbers of Last Hearth and the Glovers of Deepwood Motte bent the knee and became loyal vassals of House Stark. The Red Kings of House Bolton wore cloaks made from the skins of Stark princes they flayed, and one of the Boltons was even known as the Red Arm because he liked to plunge an arm into the bellies of captive Starks and pull out their entrails with his bare hand. The North deserved to be wiped clean by them. Yet my ancestors spared them after their defeat because they believed the North couldn't afford to fight itself any longer.
Big
Time
mistake.
soon proved them right. When the Andals swept into Westeros, they obliterated all the kingdoms of the First Men except the North. Each of the southern kingdoms fought the invaders on its own, but the north fought as one. When the Andals tried to sail up the White Knife, the Manderleys fell on their ships. When the Andals tried to march an army through the Neck, the Reeds fell on their soldiers. King Theon Stark even sailed his own army to the Andal homeland for vengeance and slew hundreds of Andal warriors. When he returned, he planted their heads on spikes along our coasts, a warning to other would-be conquerors. The warning was heeded for thousands of years, until Aegon the Conqueror. The south had already fallen to Aegon and his dragons, only the north remained. My ancestor, King Torrhen Stark, marched the north down to the Trident and beheld Aegon's army, larger than Torrhen's own by half, and with 3 dragons circling overhead. Many northern bannermen wanted to attack anyway, claiming northern valor would carry the day. Others wanted to fall back to Moat Cailin and make a stand there. But Torrhen had heard how the armies of the Rock and the Reach had burned on the field of fire, and had seen the fires still glowing beneath the rubble of Harrenhal. He knelt and laid his ancient crown at Aegon's feet, and rose a king no more but Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. Some northerners still sneer at my ancestor as the king who knelt, forgetting that because of Torrhen they're alive today to sneer. Their ancestors didn't leave their burned bones at the Trident, and their twisted swords didn't fill Aegon's new throne. Now many say that House Stark is dead and gone, and House Bolton holds the North. But the North remembers who united it. The North remembers who defended it, and the North remembers who stole it. Long ago, my ancestors spared the Boltons, trusting their oaths of fealty. I shall correct that mistake. Even the North can forget when there's nothing left to remember.
See that? I will correct that mistake. I swear she is gonna do over Jon Snow and say that he isn't the true king.
No army in the 7 kingdoms can match the pride and chivalry of the Knights of the Vale.
Don't trust her.
After all, they were the first true knights in Westeros. The Knights of the Vale were originally the Knights of Andalos, an eastern nation whose people invaded Westeros thousands of years ago. From the sea, the Vale seemed to the Andals an ideal new home, a wide, fertile valley isolated from the rest of Westeros and its kingdoms by a great mountain range. The first men who held it, moreover, were sparse and divided, and waded into battle with bronze axes and armor that couldn't match Andal horses and steel. But what the first men lacked in weaponry, they made up for in ferocity. Finally uniting behind King Robar Royce, the first men smashed the Andals in battle after battle, reclaiming the Vale and pushing the invaders back to the sea from whence they'd come. Learning from the first men, the remaining Andals united behind a leader of their own, not a king or a lord, but a knight who'd been born in the Vale and knew it as well as the first men. Sir Artus Arryn, known as the Falcon Knight. The armies of the first men and the Andals met beneath the Giant's Lance to decide the fate of the Vale. Sir Artus had many more mounted knights than the first men, who preferred to fight on foot. But the first men had seized the high ground, digging trenches in front of their ranks and lining them with sharpened stakes smeared with offal and excrement. 6 times the Andal knights charged, and 6 times the first men threw them back. But on the 7th, a fearsome Andal warrior broke through the ranks of the first men, and the Andals rushed through the gap. If King Robar had been wiser, he would have retreated and saved his army for another day. Then again, if he'd been wise at all, he'd never have risked his army of foot soldiers against mounted knights in the first place. When King Robar saw the falcon helm of Sir Artus across the field, he wagered that the Andals would break if they lost their leader, and rode hard for the Falcon Knight. The singers paint a pretty picture of the battle. The king in flashing bronze armor, the knight in silvered steel. But the duel lasted no longer than a verse of the songs. For King Robar had taken a Valyrian sword off a dead Andal lord, and it sheared through Sir Artus' helm much like a bird's wing through the air. As the Falcon Knight tumbled to earth, King Robur thought he'd won his desperate gamble. Then he heard the trumpets behind him. When he turned, he saw 500 fresh Andal knights pouring down the giant's lance.
Damn.
And the man at its head was also the man at Robur's feet. For Sir Artus, unique in that age, or indeed any age, esteemed cunning even more than martial strength, and had clad one of his knights in his spare suit of armor, leaving him to die at Robur's hand, while Sir Artus took his best horsemen up a goat track he knew from childhood. The charge of the Andal Knights broke the last great army of the First Men, who would never again threaten the new Knights of the Vale. Some of the defeated would even join their ranks in the years to come, but many more fled to the mountains, choosing savagery over submission. Ever since, the Knights of the Vale enjoyed an exclusive position in Westeros. They could sally forth from the Vale at will, knowing that if battle went against them, they could retreat through the Bloody Gate, where no army could follow. Until the dragons changed the game.
Yes.
When Aegon the Conqueror landed in Westeros, the Queen Regent of the Vale shut the Bloody Gate against the Targaryens and massed the Knights of the Vale behind it to lock it. But Visenya simply flew her dragon to a balcony of the Eyrie where the boy king was playing, and gave the boy a ride round the castle in return for his mother's submission. With the conquest, no more could the Knights of the Vale hide behind their mountains, nor, they soon discovered, did they need to. For thousands of years, the other kingdoms had warred and treated to balance each other's might, whilst the Vale kept to itself. None realized what power the Vale could have until Jon Arryn defied the Iron Throne, refusing to surrender Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon to the Mad King. The North, the Riverlands, and the Stormlands couldn't have beaten the other three kingdoms by themselves, but the Knights of the Vale rode with them. Now the North is freezing, the Riverlands are burnt, the Stormlands are spent, Dorne is distant, the Westerlands are weakened, and the Reach is paralyzed. Of all the great armies in Westeros, only the Knights of the Vale have yet to suffer exhaustion or defeat. The Bloody Gate is opening again onto Westeros, and through it passes opportunity.
Oh, Dothraki, yes. Yes. Yes.
The Doom took Valyria in minutes, but the rest of Essos wasn't so lucky. Out of these swarmed the Dothraki, and there were no dragons to push them back. The Dothraki Tide slammed first into the Sarnori, who called themselves the Tall Men, and whose ancient kingdom dominated the grasslands of Essos. The Tall Men at first scorned the Horse Lords as uncivilized barbarians, which they were. But Khal Mengo had united all of them into one Khalasar with one aim: to trample the world beneath their hooves and take other people's as their herd. One by one, the cities of the Tall Men were overwhelmed. Still, they wouldn't unite against the Dothraki. Many didn't believe the tales of the rare survivors. No army could move so fast or strike so quickly. They didn't know that the Dothraki live in the saddle and have such command over their horses that they seem to have 4 legs, not 2.
Fucking mongrels.
Where most archers fire from foot, the Dothraki fire from horseback. Charging or retreating, it makes no matter, they are just as deadly. But the Dothraki prefer close combat, howling for blood as they ride down their enemies with their araks, and there were so many of them. When Khal Mengo's son, Khal Moro, laid waste to the waterfall city of Sathar, renaming it the Place of Wailing Children, the Tall Men finally realized their peril. Led by a High King, they assembled a great army to break the Khals once and for all, and met the Dothraki on what would ever after be known as the Field of Crows. The 4 Khals commanded almost 80,000 horsemen between them. The Tall Men had 100,000 foot soldiers, 10,000 armored riders, 10,000 light horsemen, and 6,000 scythed chariots. As battle was joined, the earth-shattering advance of the tall men's chariots smashed through the center of the Dothraki horde, the spinning blades on their wheels slicing through the legs of the Dothraki horses. When one carl went down before them, cut to pieces and trampled, his Khalasar broke and fled. The chariots thundered after the fleeing horsemen, and the High King and his armored riders plunged in after them, followed by their foot soldiers waving their spears and screaming in victory. But it was a trap. The Dothraki were not fleeing, as the tall men realized when the horse lords suddenly turned their horses and unleashed a storm of arrows. Two more Khalasars swept down on the tall men's flanks, but another attacked them from the rear, cutting off their retreat. Completely encircled, the High King and his mighty hosts were destroyed. The tall men had stood for thousands of years. Now the crows feasted on their corpses, as the Dothraki squabbled over their valuables. The common wisdom is that the Dothraki Tide finally broke upon the spears of the Unsullied at Quohor, saving Essos from the Horse Lords. In truth, the days when the Dothraki could threaten the entire world had already passed. The great Khalasar forged by Khal Mengo had splintered into a dozen hordes after the death of the last great Khal, and the riders had resumed their petty feuds. The grasslands of Essos are now called the Dothraki Sea, but no more nations drown in it. Still, the Dothraki priestesses, the Dosh Khalim, prophesied that one day the Dothraki will gather at Vaes Dothrak, their holy capital, and unite once more under the greatest Khal of them all, the stallion who mounts the world. He will lead their people to the ends of the earth and grind all nations to dust beneath them. I knew a Khaleesi who the priestesses said would give birth to this stallion. She didn't. No doubt the Dosh Khalim had made the same prophecy before and will again.
Unless Daenerys hooks up with Jon
dream, but few who dream it
and that
ever
son
wake to its reality. Yet could the Dothraki,
will be the
united
one.
behind one great leader, conquer the world? When I first came to Essos, I laughed at the idea. But now, most armies are either sellswords paid to fight, who often refuse to die, or peasants called up from the fields and hovels.
Think of it, the son of Daenerys and Jon has the loyalties of the Wall, Dothraki, the North, everybody, the Settler, everybody.
But the arrows fall like rain.
Gotta be. Brotherhood without banners. Which one's this one?
King Robert still lived, and Lord Eddard Stark had just survived an ambush by Jaime Lannister in King's Landing. We were the King's men, charged by the King's hand to bring the King's justice to the false knight Gregor Clegane, who was raping and murdering the King's subjects in the Riverlands. To be honest, I cared more about the King's cellars, but I joined Lord Beric for the adventure, and maybe a grateful milkmaid or two. Ser Gregor isn't called the Mountain because of his subtlety, yet he took us by surprise at the Mummer's Ford. He'd hidden his men on both banks, and as we crossed, he fell upon us from the front and rear. I saw a single blow from his sword take a man's arm off and kill the horse beneath him. Many of us, though, were simply ridden down and drowned. The survivors spotted my down red cloak and rallied around me, and we cut our way free. 100 men we'd been that morning. By dark, only 40 were left, and Lord Beric looked to make us 39 before morning. I drew a foot of lance from his chest and poured boiling wine into the hole it left, but I knew there was no hope. When his light failed, I shut his eyes, placed my hands on his cold chest,
It's the night.
and mumbled a half-remembered blessing
It's
over
the
his
night
body,
that keeps coming back.
because he was my commander and my friend,
The flaming sword.
and I didn't know what else to do. Then, I felt his heart thud beneath his breast. His body shuddered as the fire of life rekindled inside it. I used to joke that I became a red priest because the robes hid the wine stains, but the wine itself hid an unbelieving heart. When Beric's eyes opened, so did mine. I fell to my knees and praised the one true God and begged forgiveness for my ways. I don't know if the Lord heard me, but when dawn came, Beric was still alive and stronger than he'd been. He told us that our war hadn't ended at the Mummer's Ford, but begun,
Nah,
and
son.
that every fallen brother would be avenged. We were so few, though, that all we could do was harry the Lannisters' rear. Luckily, all they could do was kill Beric. A Lannister mace shattered his helm and skull. A noose snapped his neck after he surrendered himself to save a beekeeper and his wife. The mountain's dirt pierced his eye through his visor. After each time, I stood over his corpse and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord brought him back.
Like the Undertaker.
Then we heard that Robert was dead and Lord Eddard too.
Old school
We'd been sent by
Undertaker.
the King's hand to deal with outlaws, but now we were the outlaws, and Lord Tywin was the hand of the King. Some wanted to yield, but Beric wouldn't hear of it. We were still King's men, he said, and these were the King's people the lions were savaging. If we could not fight for Robert, we would fight for them, until every man of us was dead. We'd lost the King's banner at the Mummers Ford, but then the countryside was awash with sigils and armies anyway. We became the Brotherhood without banners. Beric led us in battle, and I led us in prayer, and the Lord of Light led us in everything. When the heralds proclaimed the end of the War of the Five Kings, none of us thought of yielding. Our war wasn't over. The generals had gone home, but the soldiers stayed. Either they had no homes to return to, or they'd gotten a taste for other peoples. The Brotherhood was the people's only defense. We became the brothers of murdered siblings, husbands of murdered wives, and fathers of murdered children, led by a murdered man. Once we sought to bring the King's justice to the realm. Now we bring the Lord's, or at least we try.
That'll be it for part 1 of season 6. Dude, that has done more justice to shed light on that character than the actual show has. I remember him in the book, he was very cool. But we really should see more of him. And I'm hoping this next season we do. But yeah, just not just him, the guy that keeps coming back, but that whole group. We really haven't, like, they pop up now and again, but you don't really get a sense of what they are and the honor that they have and why they fight, compared to what this has just shown us in 5 minutes. It's done a way better job, I've got to admit. Can't even talk too much, man, my jaw's still fucked. But as always, I love this shit, man. Histories and Lore always shines way more needed light on certain characters and certain groups that the show can't always do. And I'm curious, man, will we get more of this in the actual prequel series that they want to do after the main Game of Thrones show finishes, or are they going to go back right to the very, very, very beginning? Be like the Valerians and all of them, which would be cool still. It'd be very cool still, so I guess time will tell, man. But yeah, this is just part 1, so there'll be at least 2 more. Man, we're cutting into... No, I've had 2 more halves. Don't really want to rush through it too much, man, because yeah, it's going to be a while before we get the season 7 one. So yeah, let me know, guys, what's your theories, and who do you want to see more light shined on in the coming parts? And what part of the history do you want to concentrate on for the possible prequel? Well, it's not even possible, they're doing it. They're definitely doing it. They're definitely developing it. But what period they're going to concentrate on, we don't know. Time will tell. Let me know, guys. Write comments down below. You like the video, please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. I'm Eddie Reese. Sickly. Oh, fucking Dennis. Sickly Eddie Reese from the first. Tell you later, guys.